Right, let's get to the story. For those of you who don't yet know me, I'm Sen, and I'm a fourth year medical student at Cambridge. For those of you who've forgotten Cambridge, here's a clip. Now you'd imagine that for a student at Cambridge, things go fairly smoothly. You must think that we have the best of opportunities and our lives never go wrong. Well, that's where your thinking is wrong. I want to talk quickly about my first day as a clinical medical student here at Cambridge and how it was rather unexpected. The vlogs I make are quite selective. They show you the highlights of my day, they show you the interesting parts. They don't always show you the more difficult parts, the bits where I trip over, the bits where I open a cupboard into my face, or even when I dropped a glass on my carpet the other day and it shattered. All these not so nice things don't really get into the vlog. And there's one particular thing that I thought I should finally share with you 4 weeks after it happened. A quick disclaimer, this video isn't necessarily graphic, but a few of you might find it distressing when you see my face looking a bit more mangled up. So if you're a bit squeamish, then maybe don't look at the video, but if you're in for a laugh and you want to see how funny Sen's face can get compared to how funny it is at the moment, then please do watch on. After a long summer of COVID and not really studying much, having finished my engineering intercalation, I was really looking forward to meeting patients. We'd come to Cambridge 2 weeks early to self-isolate, and during this self-isolation period we had an introductory course. After this 2-week introductory course, we were then sent out, half the year group was then sent out to the district general hospitals around Cambridge to begin a rotation of core clinical medicine. I was one of those students, and as you've seen in a previous vlog of mine, I did some shopping, I got really prepared, I was prepared to meal prep, and I bought some snacks, I bought some Pringles, I bought some soft drink, and I was really excited for this placement, looking forward to it. After dropping those things off, I came back for the weekend, and Sunday evening I headed up to the hospital about 20 miles north of Cambridge to get a good night of sleep before getting up for my 7:30 beginning of my first ever day meeting patients. Now I was quite busy during the day, and so I thought I'd treat myself when I got back to my room with one of these, a San Pellegrino Aranciato Rossa, one of the nicer flavours from San Pellegrino, and what a treat it was. But unfortunately I was a bit too full to have the whole can, so as one does, I drank half of it and I left the other half on my desk. Now to my demise, I opened the window during the night and I went to sleep. I woke up in the morning at 6 o'clock, bright and early, to get ready, to get dressed, to look dapper, and to meet our clinical lead doctor and get meeting patients. I was super excited, I was super stoked, I had my stethoscope, I had my shirts ironed, I had my chinos ready, so I rolled out of bed, and glistening on my table, under the table lamp that I usually keep on as a sort of a night lamp, was my other half of the can of drink. And I was like, you know what? How lucky am I? I wasn't greedy last night and I left myself some for the morning. Usually I'm not a fan of drinking soft drinks before I sleep or when I first wake up. I like water instead. But this was a treat. And lo and behold, that's when trouble struck. And within the first gulp, I felt, the lovely sweet taste of the drink, but immediately after, a pincer-like bite in my mouth. And I was like, holy moly, what's this? Did they leave like a citrus thorn in this drink? What have they done? Because I felt like something pierced my inner lip. And so I just spat it out immediately. Then saw the mess I'd made having spat out this drink. Now, it's not the most gentlemanly thing, spitting out something, but think about it. If you get bitten in the mouth whilst drinking something when you're up at 6 a.m. in the morning, it's an exception that can be let by. But then I was sort of struggling to work out what had happened. So I, examined the floor looking for what it could have been, because that stinging had stopped once I spat it out. And that's when I was like, oh boy. So seeing the wasp, which looked kind of dead to me, I also noticed his sort of brother or whatever friend flying around in the room. So one of them had died trying to sting me, and one of them was still alive. And I think what happened was, during the night, I'd left the drink open, some wasps had come flying in, decided to have their own late night party with this drink, with the sweet nectar, and they stayed in there for too long. So yes, I'd been stung by a wasp at 6 a.m. in the morning, drinking a soft drink. Not a big deal. Now, most of us in the world are not allergic to insect stings, and as far as I knew, I hadn't been. The only time I'd previously been stung by a wasp or a bee was actually in Sri Lanka when I was 4 or 5 years old, when my sister and I saw a hive in my grandparents' garden. My sister's logic was that if she gets a pipe and I hold a bucket at the end of it and she hits the pipe and she hits the hive with the pipe, then automatically the hive should break and the honey should flow down the pipe into the bucket that I was holding. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And when I was 4 or 5, I can't remember exactly, the hive of bees were very angry, and one of them came and stung me in the eye. And that was pretty bad, but luckily on the East Coast in Sri Lanka, the healthcare is pretty good, and so I sorted it out fairly quickly. I haven't had any major allergic reactions since. And so when I got stung by this wasp, I wasn't really thinking of having an allergic reaction. I was just thinking, right, sure, as with anything, it might inflame a bit, might get a bit bigger, but hopefully not too big, because I've got to meet my fellow medical students later on this morning, and so I didn't want to look odd. So for the next 15-20 minutes, the pain remained there, and arguably it was getting worse and worse. And I noticed that the lip was getting a bit firmer as the inflammation process took place, as the blood vessels expanded, as the fluid was being pushed into the interstitial place, as my sort of white blood cells were getting in there to see, okay, what sort of toxin is this, what's going on here. As all of that was happening, it was getting bigger and bigger. So then I just spent a good 20 minutes in front of the mirror, looking at the lip grow, contemplating how stupid I was. Mother had always said when you're drinking any drink, make sure to pour it out into the glass. And until then, I hadn't really considered that as being useful advice. And turns out, it might be a wise idea to pour out your drink before you drink it. But I was still in my room in front of the mirror working out what to do. I realized I had to get ready, I had to have a shower, I had to put my clothes on, and luckily all the things were pre-ironed and, just ready to put on and go. But I was worrying because I didn't want this to grow bigger and bigger, and by the minute it was getting more and more painful. And as one does, you take your phone out and you start looking at, the different symptoms and signs of, what could be happening. And so reading that made me more nervous, and I was feeling a bit dizzy at this point, very slightly dizzy. I know there's an emergency room, but I don't want to go and inconvenience them at 6 o'clock in the morning, nor did I want to call an ambulance. And to be super specific, I didn't even know where the emergency room was in the hospital since this was my first day there. I knew, however, that there was an ambulance station very close to my accommodation, because as you drive to the accommodation at this district general hospital, you pass the place where all the ambulances are stationed and cleaned and, prepped for the next call out. So I knew where that was, and that wasn't too far. So I just decided to myself, half an hour after being stung, right, it's going to be best for me to go and see some sort of medical staff, because this is getting bigger and bigger, and I was scared my lip would actually pop, because think about it, your skin can stretch here. If it stretches beyond a certain point, it might just crack and that could bleed. Just loosely put on my shirt, yanked out my trousers, put on my shoes, got my card, my room keys, and I stumbled out of the accommodation in search for medical help. And I didn't want to disturb any of my flatmates because they were all sleeping at 6 o'clock in the morning. Other than one of them, they didn't really know me too well. And so, I thought of it as being a bit annoying, waking them all up just because I'd been stung by a wasp because I'd drunk in a can of drink that had a wasp in it. To avoid looking stupid, I just stumbled out of my room, my block, and I was trying to work out where the ER was. So I said to myself, right, I'm going to slowly walk towards the ER around the perimeter of the hospital, which I knew, and then I'd get to the ER in about 10 minutes. I started walking, and lo and behold, I started feeling even more dizzy. And I then quickly stopped a car that was driving by in the hospital site, and I was like, excuse me, I've been stung by a wasp, it's getting worse, can you take me to the ER? And this chap, given it's COVID and all, was like, no, sorry, I can't really take you there, just find some help or go to the ER or whatever. And I was like, yeah, cheers. And I was going to the ER anyway, I was wondering if he'd give me a lift. That guy didn't help me, unfortunately, and so I just saw the ambulance station in the background, and I said, right, I'm going to try my luck, walk in there, hopefully some people are in there, there must be, because, if there is an ambulance call out, they'll be leaving from there, and I reckoned if I go in there, they could look at me. I stumbled into the garage in which the ambulances are parked and being prepped, and the paramedics in there who were prepping the ambulance just looked around at me with a bit of confusion. And because the lip was so big now, I was actually struggling to speak as well. I simply couldn't move my lip up and down, it was maybe 4 or 5 times the size. And so I just sort of, signed signal to them, and I pointed to my lip, and they were like, okay, I think they worked out what was happening. They later told me that they thought I was a work experience student coming in really early in the morning to understand better what paramedic life was like. But no, I'd been stung by a wasp and I needed help. With my little explanation, they worked out that I'd had an allergic reaction to an insect bite. 2 wonderful paramedics loaded me into their ambulance, and I didn't even have to leave to treat me there. As it stayed parked, I was in the back getting treated. They quickly hit my blood pressure, asked me if I had any allergies or not, confirmed who I was, and then pumped in some IV chlorpheniramine. That's an antihistamine. Now, the reason why you get allergic reactions is usually because you have this type of cell called a mast cell in your body, and usually upon some damage or some sort of infectious agent or some sort of allergic agent or some sort of allergen, these mast cells quickly release a load of histamine, and that causes inflammation. That causes things to get bigger, and usually that, in the wrong places, that can be quite bad. So they quickly pumped in this double dose of IV chlorpheniramine, and the reason why they gave it IV actually was because the lip was growing bigger and bigger by the minute, even in their own presence. And so if they'd given me an oral tablet, the uptake time would have been a good half an hour. Whereas IV, you're literally pumping it into a brain, it's intravenous, and so it worked fairly quickly within 10 minutes. I was in an ambulance, sitting there at 6:20 in the morning, getting drugs pumped into me to try and calm the allergic reaction down. And this is how I come to the point of how I was a patient on the first day of my medical school training. And I must say it was a very surreal experience, being there in an ambulance, having ECG leads stuck on you, having your blood pressure being taken by an automatic reader, having an oxygen saturation monitor on there. It is quite a peculiar situation to be in. However, I just wanted to quickly reflect upon the care I received. The paramedics that looked after me were so lovely. They were comforting me, they were asking if I was alright, they were making sure that I wasn't too anxious, they were making sure I was comfortable. They had a bit of empathy, I was this dopey medical student that had come in for my first day and had been stung by a bee. They realised the anxiety, they realised the confusion I was in that situation. And so the calmness with which they spoke to me, the things they talked about, really made me feel better and at ease in their presence. Also, the most wonderful thing was how there was no hesitation on the care that I needed. And this is one of the benefits of the National Health Service, how there's care that's free upon delivery. The fact that I just walked into an ambulance, and ambulance care is quite expensive. It's not really cheap to run an ambulance. And so the fact that it loaded me into there, got me some drugs without hesitating once, without asking for any money, I was just amazed. This NHS is wonderful. You've got these wonderful people that are so helpful, providing people with care when they really need it. And that's one of the amazing things, and I think that's one of the strong points of the British Healthcare Service. How, yes, it's funded by taxes, but when you really need it, you get the care that you need. You get the urgent stabilization that you need. And the last thing I was amazed by was that these paramedics, they were just preparing their ambulance. They were, they could have just easily sent me to the ER. They could have even picked me up in the ambulance and taken me to the ER. But the decision they made to treat me inside the ambulance, just there and then, they dropped their morning activities to treat me as a patient. I just found very, very meaningful. The fact that they just prioritized me so quickly and gave me the care I need. Now, it turns out that the wasp actually stung me on the inside of my lip here. That's a very dangerous spot because it's highly perfused. There's lots of blood going to there. If it stings you on the wrist or your ankle, you didn't have as many blood vessels there, and so it doesn't spread as much. Whereas this, because it's highly perfused, is spreading along the lip, along the capillaries of the lip, and therefore it's getting bigger quite quickly. It could have been far, far worse, and I could have stopped breathing if the wasp had stung me the other side onto my tongue. Because your tongue is also a very highly perfused bit of muscle. If it had been stung on the tongue and my tongue had expanded, that would have arguably blocked my whole airway off. Because your tongue doesn't just sit at the front, your tongue goes right to the back of your throat. And so that could have been quite a dangerous situation. So I guess I was quite lucky that morning with the fact that the wasp just stung me on my lip. He was, he killed himself or she killed herself, but at least they didn't kill me. I also must be so thankful to those paramedics. They even managed to get me a bit of block of ice, although they don't carry ice. They went into their own sort of staff room freezer and got me like an ice pack that I used the rest of the day to cool my lip down and to help it keep calm. But yes, that's how my first day at hospital, my first ever clinical placement began with